You know how we always think of nature as this perfect engineer, that evolution is some master architect, building these absolutely flawless designs over millions of years. But what if that's not really the whole story? Let's dive into that.
Okay, to get started, I want you to try a quick experiment with me. Right now, close your right eye, and with your left eye, just focus on the L you see on the screen. Now, while you're staring at that L, slowly move your head a little closer or a little farther away from the screen. At some point, poof, the R on the right should just completely disappear.
Did you see it? Wild, right? That wasn't a glitch on your screen. That's a real, permanent hole in your vision, a blind spot. And your brain is just so incredible at papering over the cracks, filling in the gap with whatever's around it, that you almost never ever notice it's there. But it is. And you know what? It's there by design.
And that brings us right back to this idea of perfection. We just kind of assume that our bodies, which have been shaped by thousands and thousands of years of natural selection, are these flawless machines. But this little blind spot trick, well, it suggests something else is going on. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, the goal of evolution isn't perfection at all. It might be something completely different.
So let's start with this hole in your vision. I mean, why on earth is it even there? Well, it turns out it's a fundamental part of how your eye is wired. It's a built-in design compromise.
Now check this out. This is a really fascinating comparison. On the left, that's our eye, a vertebrate eye. The nerve fibers, the wiring, they're actually placed in front of the light-detecting cells. So to get the signal to the brain, they all have to bundle together and literally punch a hole through the back of your retina. And that's your blind spot. But then look at the octopus eye on the right. Its nerve fibers are routed neatly behind the retina. No hole, no blind spot. I mean, it's just a more logical, you could say more perfect design.
So is our eye some kind of big mistake? No, not at all. It's really just a legacy, a leftover from our own unique evolutionary path. The design was good enough to help our ancestors survive and thrive, so there was never enough evolutionary pressure to completely re-engineer the whole thing from scratch. And this is our first huge clue. Nature very often settles for good enough.
And this good enough principle, it's not just locked away in our anatomy. It shows up in behavior too. Like for instance, do you think animals always make the absolute perfect, most optimal choice when they're looking for food? Well, let's take a look.
So for a long time, the main idea was this thing called optimal foraging theory. And it's a pretty logical model, right? It basically assumes that to survive, an animal has to be super efficient, always picking the option that gives it the most energy for the least amount of work. It assumes animals are perfectionists, always going for the absolute best choice.
But here's the kicker. When scientists actually took this idea of perfection out into the real world, they found something pretty shocking. In one major review of foraging studies, they found that in more than 75% of cases, the animals did not act the way the optimal model said they would. I mean, that's huge. They were constantly doing things that seemed inefficient.
And these graphs, I know they look a little complicated, but they show us a really powerful reason why. This comes from an idea called robust satisficing. And you don't need to worry about the math. Just look at the story it tells. The strategy on the left, which is all about aiming for the absolute maximum payoff. Well, that works great if the world is totally predictable. But look at the graph on the right. In the real, messy, uncertain world where things can go wrong, that high-risk strategy can totally crash and burn. A safer approach, one that aims for a good enough, reliable result, is actually a much smarter way to survive in the long run.
And the researchers put it perfectly. They said a reliable and adequate solution is preferable to an optimal but unreliable solution. In other words, animals aren't always trying to hit the jackpot. They're trying to not go bust. They're playing the long game. And that means choosing the sturdy, reliable, good enough option time and time again.
And that brings us to our final and maybe most important piece of this whole puzzle. And this one has everything to do with us, right now. If nature builds these good enough systems that are designed for an uncertain, ancient world, what happens when that world changes really, really fast?
See, our bodies are adapting constantly, but on totally different schedules. Some adjustments happen in seconds. You stand up, your heart rate changes. Others take years, like how our bodies develop based on our childhood environment. But the slowest changes of all, the deep ones, are written in our genes, and those can take thousands of years to evolve.
So here's the problem. Our modern world, our diets, our stress levels, our lifestyles, has changed more in the last 100 years than in the previous 1,000. And that is way too fast for our genetics to keep up. This massive gap between our ancient biology and our modern lives, it has a name. It's called an evolutionary mismatch.
Now, this mismatch can pop up in a couple of key ways. You can have an evolutionary mismatch, where genes that were once super helpful, like a thrifty genotype that was amazing at storing calories when food was scarce, suddenly become a problem in a world where calories are everywhere. Think type 2 diabetes. Or you can have a developmental mismatch, where your body gets signals in early life that prepare it for one kind of world, but then you end up living in a completely different one.
And this chart here kind of maps out all the different ways that can happen. You don't have to follow every single arrow, but the main takeaway is this. A breakdown can happen at any level of our body's programming. When our good enough biology, which was built for a world of scarcity and uncertainty, suddenly gets dropped into our modern world, well, the systems can get overloaded. The result isn't a broken body. It's a body that's perfectly adapted for a world that most of us just don't live in anymore.
Okay, so we've looked at our anatomy, at animal behavior, and at our own health in the modern world. Let's pull all three of these threads together and see the big picture they're painted.
From the weird wiring in our eyes, to the smart survival strategies of animals, to the health challenges we face today, we see the exact same principle again and again. Nature's true blueprint isn't about creating perfection. It's about building in robustness. Evolutionary success was never about being flawless. It's about being tough enough and flexible enough to handle a world that's always changing.
And that kind of leaves us with a really interesting question to chew on. If the entire biological world, top to bottom, including us, is built on this foundation of good enough, what does that say about our own modern obsession with trying to achieve perfection in every little part of our lives? Maybe the real lesson from nature isn't about being flawless. Maybe it's that being resilient is the real prize.